and the public finally alerted to it. Newspapers had leaders about it, television continued to publicise it, and within a short time, unbelievably, there was heat treatment, followed shortly by recombinant. So that silence screwed us. I would also argue that the DOH and medical professionals, that the medical professionals involved in working with haemophiliacs and others infected, no, I've just repeated myself, so I'm changing that. Right. The adage, necessity that is the mother of invention, springs to mind, and I do believe by lying and keeping this truth from the community, we were denied the possibility of safe treatment years earlier. And I would suggest that this would be an area which the inquiry address in some detail. We were often made, the people who were affected, that is, to feel that in some way we were to blame. They would hear no word of warning, and we who did know something was happening were treated as pariahs. I'm the doctor, and if I think it's okay, it is okay. And as the diseases and ill health persisted and people became even sicker with new terrors heaped upon them, and I can testify this because it happened to our son several times, there seemed to be a standard procedure of whipping some poor sod off from the waiting area at the haemophilia centres and breezingly telling them that they'd been exposed to yet another horrifying disease, and then sending them off into the night, sadly not whistling a cheery song. Two other important areas in which the inquiry have already said they wish to look more closely, and which I totally endorse, are the Haemophilia Society, who my husband and I have supported financially ever since our son was born, even when they refused, when called upon, to stand up and fight for the affected community, telling me, we really only deal with newly diagnosed and young children. They resisted that call. And perhaps even more terribly, the terrible trusts that were created to help the afflicted community. The misery and the appalling lack of care or even of interest in the disaster that was unfolding can never be overstated. I myself was appalled when I was dealing with them on behalf of my son's family. They were chaotic. They were offensive. Certainly talking to me, they referred to any financial assistance as charity. Charity! This was so appalling that I took it further and will give evidence of this at the appropriate time. At the time of these conversations, our son had been dead for 3 weeks. So that is an area which I cannot emphasize more strongly. Their trustees turned up perhaps once a month, so if you called in desperate need, you often had to wait until the next trustee was due next month to sign the necessary papers. Their website pages were of such poor quality that if there was any information, it was incomprehensible. I've had my own experiences with them and have heard of many more who suffered even worse treatment than they had meted out on this already decimated community. They needed a very bright light indeed shone upon them. So this is what I say to you. This is our inquiry. This is where we get to ask all those questions that we were not allowed to get out of our mouths, and where under the careful gaze of the inquiry they will finally have to be answered. As I said at the beginning of this speech, we, the affected community, acquired these infections via very many different means. And when at a recent meeting at the inquiry headquarters, I came to understand that there was a tremendous discord amongst many different groups of people who had become infected in many different ways: transfusions, haemophiliacs, sexual activity. There was bad feeling, and I found it distressing. I have worked alone since my son was diagnosed with haemophilia in 1976, a few weeks after he was born. There had been no haemophilia in our family, so we had no advice or knowledge in-house, as they say. Right back then, I saw a terrible disconnect between the groups representing haemophiliacs and those who acquired a HIV or Hep C via other routes. I therefore would like to repeat what I said at the meeting and what I said earlier, that I see no difference. All had been infected through blood that was known to be contaminated by the very doctors and authorities who were supposed to be looking after us. And dying, as our son did, is dying, whatever the method of infection. Living a sick life as an infected person is horrible enough. Without those infected by a different route driving wedges between us. So as I said at the beginning of the speech, it was so wonderful and healing to see how inclusive the film and the opening was yesterday. And I do hope that all of those divisions are gone, and instead of all of us so destroyed by what happened, fighting each other, we can work together with this terrific inquiry team we have been given to bring justice to the entire community. Before I end my speech, I do want to bring forward those who have stood so firmly on my side and on the side of those seeking truth and justice to this affected community of ours. I want to thank Diana Johnson and Sir Peter Bottomley and all those who preceded them on the APPG for contaminated blood. Over the years, they all kept going, fighting for justice on our behalf, doggedly and determinedly. Our local MP, Catherine West, has remained interested and concerned about the wrongs that have been visited on us. And I especially want to mention my friend Lynn Kelly, head of Haemophilia Wales, whom I met years ago at a Department of Health board that I was on, where we had a meeting with the heads of the haemophilia units. They had asked her to give a talk about the fact that the affected community in Wales had collected enough money to buy a FibroScan, but did not have enough money to fund a technician who could work it and analyse the results. She gave a brilliantly clear exposition on this subject, and when she sat down, no one thanked her. They hardly had listened. The haemophilia chiefs started arguing between themselves about their funding. I resigned from the committee, found out who she was, got in touch, and in the years since, she has been my friend and my guide into all things haemophilia. And most of all, I want to call out my sister, Baroness Lynn Featherstone, my younger sister, you must understand, who has supported and helped not just me, but those in our community who approached her for help, with an energy and understanding that was able to take us further and in more depth than we could have imagined. And finally, to my husband, Dan, who listened to me listen to me recite this speech and changed it 10 times at least, and not particularly patiently, but with an attention and a care shared, and love of me and our family. So, finally, against the odds, we have an inquiry with a judge and a team who are totally committed to bringing out all the truths and untruths of this terrible tragedy. Thanks, guys.
We'll take a 20-minute break. Be back, please, at 20 to 12.